The Reverend John Sargent, born in 1710 in Newark, New Jersey, was graduated first in his class at Yale College in 1729. Also from Yale, he received a second bachelor's degree in theology in 1732. Surrounded by Europeans and vastly diminished in strength, in order to survive, the Mohicans agreed to share the land with the Congregationalists and adopt Christianity. In 1734, Reverend Sargent was ordained in Deerfield, Massachusetts, in the presence of Concopat and Umpacini. Sargent was the first minister of the present Congregational Church of Stockbridge, Massachusetts. Sargent realized that it was in the best interest of the Mohican that they become reasonably civilized and learn English. Also in Stockbridge lived a Dutch trader, Van Valkenburg, one of the first Europeans to immigrate to the Great Meadow. Van Valkenburg acted as translator and sold the Mohican tribe gunpowder, lead, and after free samples, quarts of rum. Viewed as a vice by the Congregationalists, Sargent called the tribesmen's alcohol addiction their beloved destruction. The church viewed drinking as a vice, and Van Valkenburg was unhappy with Sargent's interfering with his profitable business in rum and gunpowder. Sargent preached that the rum traders were evil and that Van Valkenburg was Satan himself. Van Valkenburg countered by telling the tribesmen that their freedom and basic rights were being violated when they were told not to drink, and that they were being used as dogs and slaves by the English. The Reverend Sargent learned the Mohican language, which he said was guttural like Hebrew, another indication of the Mohicans' Israelite ancestry. Reverend Sargent also wrote a complete vocabulary translation and translated most of the Old Testament and all the New Testament except Revelations into Mohican. It took John Sargent 2 days to write his 35-page weekly sermon, which took 2 hours to deliver and was done twice, once in each language. From his pulpit located at the site of the Reverend Field Memorial Children's Chimes, Reverend Sargent told the Mohicans in their language that evil was punished in hell and that good deeds were rewarded in an afterlife, but that God was merciful. Sargent found preaching to them in their native language to be exhausting. Foregoing the Calvinist doctrines being revived around New England churches by Jonathan Edwards, Sargent did not believe in a vengeful and angry God. While their tragedy and suffering touched his heart, John Sargent viewed the Mohicans as godless savages, a very miserable and degenerate part of the human race, with their own foolish, barbarous, and wicked custom. They knew nothing like government among themselves. They had an aversion to everything that restrains their liberty. But he observed that they were naturally as ingenious and good-tempered as other people, and many of the little children very pretty and agreeable, and seemingly needing but the right cultivation to form their minds and manners into every laudable quality and action of which human nature is capable. Although Sargent taught the tribe that it was wrong to roam the woods and live in wigwams, and that the Mohican were to build houses and live in them and till the fields like the English, often during maple sugar season in the spring, the tribe would leave town and move into the woods. Miss Electa Jones, Stockbridge town historian, wrote in 1854, "When the Indians went to the woods this year, at the sugar season, Mr. Sargent and Mr. Woodbridge accompanied them, and in that way greatly increased the opportunities of doing good and of gaining their language. Night and morning, Mr. Sargent says, he led their devotions, and when the labors of the day were over, taught the Indians to sing. His bed consisted of a deerskin spread upon boughs of the spruce, and 3 blankets for his covering. Their diet was low but cleanly and well cooked by the wives of Concopat and Umpacini. Their drink was cold water. Mr. Sargent spent part of the time at Wenoctacook, Stockbridge, and part at Scottacook, Sheffield, changing places with Mr. Woodbridge." The Reverend Sargent wrote, "Our Indians are this week gone out to make sugar. Mr. Woodbridge and I design to go out to them next day after tomorrow and live with them till they return if we can hold it out. Perhaps we will be so taken with them and their way of living that we shall take each of us a wife from amongst and sadly disappoint all other fair ones that may have any expectation from us. And indeed, I am almost of opinion this will be our wisest course, lest if we don't disappoint them, they will us. Reverend Sargent later married Abigail Williams, age 17, the daughter of Ephraim Williams, Stockbridge's first citizen and real estate developer, also father of the founder of Williams College. Reverend John Sargent worked to form the first Indian town. In 1739, the town of Stockbridge was formed, and the Mohicans began to be called the Stockbridge Indians. Stockbridge was a congregational town, with Ephraim Williams as moderator, Umpachini and Concopat as selectmen, and Josiah Jones as constable in the shared government. English settlers and Mohican families worshiped together in the first church original building. Known as the Meeting House and built of wood, it stood from 1739 to 1785 at what is now marked by the Children's Chimes Tower. Chief Concopat died in 1745, and after only 15 years in the ministry, John Sargent died at age 39 in 1749 of tuberculosis.